going? Okay. Yeah, I do. I'm supposed to. It shows that it's receiving my audio. Can you hear it? Okay. Slideshow. Well, I got the project. I need to get the PowerPoint on here too. You hear me? Okay, good. Okay, there we go. There's PowerPoint. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. Okay. Is that better? The Tom said hi. Okay. So that's full screen, and if I okay, I can switch over. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, we can go to get started. I can't. I have my headphones plugged. I can't hear anything through them. I'm not sure if are you able to talk through, so I can answer some stuff. All right. Let me see here. Does this work? All right. Okay. All right. We'll get started. Okay. So we're gonna go through, talk a little bit about advanced UI design using MGI actor panel actors. One of the things I was looking at lately is, oh, sorry. So, I'm Adam Miller. I used to work with Mike and Tom in San Diego at Phillips Respironics, and I'm a certified LabVIEW architect. So one of the things I focus on a lot when designing is the user interface. So I'm usually trying to come up with different ways to make UI design a little easier for other people as well. So one of the things I want to go through for this presentation is, next slide here, I'll talk a little bit about the UI prototyping that I do myself. So things like color scheme, the UI theme itself, layout, storyboarding. So we'll spend a little bit of time with that. And then I'll go through how to actually implement that using MGI's panel actors. There's another toolkit I use quite often, and we'll go through, we'll touch on this a little bit, but that's the Lava, LabVIEW. Group has one for an animation toolkit that kind of helps out with the responsiveness of your user interface. So we'll spend a little bit of time taking a look at that and how that's implemented with panel actors as well. So let's see here. Some of the UI prototyping tools that I've used, I started with PowerPoint. It's kind of the easiest way to really create icons, background images, any kind of images you need for your user interface. So if you don't have a lot of experience in some of the more advanced tools, PowerPoint's that's a pretty good one to use. So we can take a quick look at that as well. Some of the advanced UI tools, Photoshop and Illustrator. So we'll take a look at Photoshop briefly, and what I'll do to create just a simple icon. For me, Photoshop is the fastest, easiest way. Illustrator is a little more advanced. That's for vector images. You know, unless you're really comfortable with creating, you know, artistic images and icons, I'd probably either just stay with PowerPoint, but I will take a look at the more advanced Photoshop as well. Yeah, I think Photoshop right now, if anybody is interested after this, I think it's about $10 a month, so it's not too expensive. And you will see by the end, it kind of does buy you a little more professional design over PowerPoint, but it does come with a little more learning curve to go with it. Okay, so we'll take a look right now at just the UI theme. Kind of where I start from getting requirements from a customer, and then seeing what they really need in an application. Sometimes customers have an idea of what they want it to feel and look like. Sometimes they even sketch up a UI that they want to see, how it's laid out, things like that. So I'll put a little quote in here. You know, a lot of the things I do, I don't really create myself. I take, steal, and borrow ideas of things that already exist. Things like Apple, Google applications, Microsoft. You know, when you're looking at these applications, look at the way that they move, look at the colors, look at the layouts, the spacing between, you know, see images and the spacing between what should be apparent to the user and kind of what is secondary and what lays in the background. These are all things we'll take a look at. Okay, so we'll take a little time to take a look at the color theme here. The first thing I do, once I have an idea of a theme that I want to choose, start right away with defining a color palette. And the first thing is it going to be a dark theme or a light theme? I don't really implement both in a LabVIEW application anymore. LabVIEW is not really super friendly with that. So what I'll do is I'll define right up front, do I want it to be dark? Do I want it to be light? Do the people using it even like dark themes? I know I myself prefer dark themes, but there are a lot of people that do prefer light themes, so that's a good thing to define up front. Because I have gotten, you know, to the point where you're developing something in a dark theme, and then they say, oh, okay, you know what, actually I want a light theme. So that's something to make, you know, define right away up front. And then from that, you can take a look and start choosing your color palette from here. I really only choose maybe 3 or 4 colors. What's the background color going to be? What's the primary color? And then what's the secondary color going to be? And then what I'll do is I'll just lay the colors down just like you see here, right on top of each other. It helps you really visualize how they look laid on top. You know, primary colors can be buttons, tiles, titles, things that should be apparent to the user. Secondary can also be something that could be more apparent to the user. So if you have a button, in this case I made this kind of like a bright green, so like an OK button, something that should really stand out as well. So you have 2 color schemes. Sometimes you have a third if you want to have something that kind of, you know, a third color could be something that really kind of lies in the background, something that doesn't draw too much attention, maybe something that divides. So just to show what I'll usually do, here I'll just take these colors, I'll lay them out. Let's see if I can expand this over here. Second, where's So maybe I'll go through and I'll start picking through colors. When I'm doing this, I'm looking for colors that are not bold and bright, there's a certain theme I like to look for, especially so if I had a color, yellow's one that I would consider pretty bold. It always sticks out. It grabs a little too much attention if it's not purposely trying to grab attention. So for these sort of colors, I might grab something that's, yellow's kind of a bad example, but if we go back here, that's kind of pale orange, it could be a nice one. And then I'll go through and I might go in a little deeper. I might grab a color dropper and then start to tweak it a little more until I get something that kind of stands out a little different. And then again, to play with the transparency. And that's where you really start to gain different levels, secondary, primary, and then this third option as well. So you can see just playing with the transparency easily how it kind of hides away. This is something I do a lot in a lot of the colors, icons, backgrounds, to draw attention to certain things. So this is a nice easy way. There are tools available, especially from Google, and I have links at the end of this presentation as well that'll take you to some of the tools Google has. They can help you lay out your user interface, lay out your colors a little better so you can actually physically see what it's going to look like. Defining these up front will save you a lot of time as you're developing throughout, so you don't have to constantly think about what colors you want to choose. You already have them defined up front, and what colors are going to belong to icons, what colors are going to belong to titles. That really helps speed the process up as you're developing. I've only briefly played around with NXG, so I don't have too much experience with it yet. Yeah, actually, I would be interested in to see what the UI experience is like in that. Mike, have you played with it? Just curious. Okay. Alright, I'll ask you afterwards. I'll ask you offline. Alright. We'll move on to, so the next thing I do is I start considering the layout. Based on either the customer's requirements, or if they don't have any, that kind of gives me the freedom to do kind of whatever I want. But a rule of thumb, when I'm laying these out, I always have a margin on the sides, whether it be 10 pixels, 20 pixels, something along those lines. They usually don't go over that count. And then you have consistent column sizes too. So if you have blocks of images or graphs or controls, whatever the user input is, I like to make sure that they are consistent with and they're separated. Or I guess these are called gutters. And a lot of these terminologies comes from Google, just so you know, that's where a lot of these terms are coming from. So Google kind of defines, use a margin in a column and a gutter to separate your UI components. So this is just a simple kind of layout just to visually show what I would do in an application. And I do have an app that we'll take a look at that'll demonstrate this a little more. Now this concept's a little more for probably like web development. It's not as straightforward in LabVIEW, obviously, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but having kind of defined sizing requirements up front will help you size out the UI. So we'll take a look at how I kind of implemented that as well in some of the VIs. So after I get my layout kind of design in my head, I'll start storyboarding the UI experience. So I don't go too crazy here, just kind of what's the main screen going to look like? What will the graphs look like? Is there going to be some sort of like advanced interface where they can configure a device or whatever's going on here? So kind of the theme of this one would be a manufacturing tool, something an operator on a manufacturing line would interface with. So that's kind of the example I'm using here. Two things I'll typically have for something like this is like a start screen. You start the application, the first thing the operator sees is select the device that you want to test. One of the things I do a lot when I'm doing the storyboard is just to show definition. Right? If you take a look at what's really in focus here, and that would be this dialog box. Right? It's right up in front. You have your bright secondary color, kind of draws you into, okay, select your device, select OK. The background is also transparent as well. So I can make it darker, I can make it lighter, show you how I do that in LabVIEW as well. You can see if it's 100% transparency, it's not really doing a lot for us. Our attention's kind of drawn a little bit to the front, a little bit to the title bar in the back, and if you even have more images and icons, graphics in the back, it just looks kind of messy. So what I do a lot is I always have some sort of transparent background that I can show and be visible at any point in time. So you can see as I make it darker and darker, that dialogue becomes very apparent. So it's something I like to do, and I lay that out in my storyboards a lot. So anyway, I work my way through screen by screen. I'm not going to put everything on the storyboard, just a general idea, basics, the layout, help you understand, like we talked about in the previous slide, what do you want your margins to look like, how are you going to set up your columns, and if you're going to use gutters, what are the sizing constraints going to be on these as well. So this particular example just has a simple kind of simple UI where you have one button on the front for the operator. They don't have a ton of options. It's just run the test. And then they might have some additional options for maybe an engineer on the floor, something that they can go into advanced. The operator can change the device. Or settings would also be for an engineer, probably something that would require a password. So anyway, I'll create a couple of these just to get a feel. I don't go overboard. Once I have an idea, then I'll jump into the code and then we'll start actually creating VIs. Okay. So I didn't want to spend too much time on the UI design in the PowerPoint. I just kind of want to really jump into the code and how I implemented that. So what we'll do first is we'll talk about just the layout. We'll run through this demo application I have. We'll take a look at the design and we'll take a look at the responsiveness of the application in the different screens, and then we'll take a look at how these screens are constructed using the MGI panel actors. So just a brief overview of what that is. It's typically an actor core, a subpanel that resides on the actor core VI, and then another actor, which would be a panel that gets inserted into the subpanel. So that is the design strategy behind MGI panels, is subpanels or multiple subpanels will reside in an actor core VI, and we'll just launch front panel instances into each of these subpanels. And that's the design approach that I use for all the user interfaces. So let's jump over to this project I have here. Let's see, this. Here we go. Okay, now can you see the LabVIEW project? Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Is it? If I spin that, is that any better? Okay, 1 second. Let me see if I can quick fix on that. That is? Okay. Okay, just took a second to update. All right. So let's just run the program, and then we'll take a step back and we'll take a look at some of the VIs we use from MGI and some of the ones that I created to implement this. Okay. Let's see. I think I need to add another window here. All right, 1 second. Let's see. Sorry, 1 second. guys. Display capture maybe. Okay, so I was trying to get a display of the whole screen because I have some dialogues. Bear with me for a second here. Mike, is there a way to just grab the whole screen so I don't have to grab just a window so I can see? Okay. Display capture. Okay. Display one. So I don't see it showing up yet. Yeah, it says display one. I only got one display, so. Sorry guys, I'm working with Mike right now trying to figure out how to get the. No, this isn't working. Just one. I'm just on a laptop. Okay. All right. So let's see here. We'll just have to most of the UI is a single pane anyway, so sorry, we'll just have to skip I guess the pop-ups. So I can get that working later, but let's just jump back over here. Okay. All right, I'll put the main VI on here. So let me just kind of click through some of the initial things here. Okay. So here we go. Let's see, I think a little bit of that bottom's cut off, is it? Fit this on here any better? Okay. Alright, I think I got the full screen displayed on here. Alright, let's start it again. So, this is the main VI for my demo application. Simply, what I chose to do for a color theme, I kind of based this application off of an infotainment system that you would see in a car. So I was looking at, BMWs, some of the more higher end Bentley infotainment systems, what colors they use, what kind of transparency do they use on the icons, the bezels, what kind of outlines they have around the bezels. You can kind of see. I don't usually do a gradient thing, but since this particular application I was working on is for an automotive product, I chose to do kind of like an automotive interface. That's a lot of things I do. I'm looking for an inspiration on something. Just find something that is already kind of done. So I took ideas from these different auto manufacturers to kind of come up with this simple interface. So what I decided to do, so I chose a dark theme here. I chose the blue title line up top, separate between the title and the main application. I chose to do a tab on the left side here, and it's a responsive tab as well. So when you click on something, it moves, it accelerates, it decelerates, comes to rest. And this is something that was available in, I think, a BMW actually. It had a similar tab feature over here, which I wanted to implement in my application. So we'll go through and we'll take a look at how that is accomplished as well. But up front, I knew when developing this, I wanted something that was kind of it's like fluid UI or responsive, that it really kind of makes it look and feel like something you're used to, like using your iPhone or using any kind of modern user interface, whether you're on a website or something. You always have some sort of fluid motion, things that don't just pop up right away, but they kind of either slide in or they slide out. So I'll go ahead and I'll run through a simulated test on here. We can see how the screens move. Now you won't see the pop-ups. There's only one pop-up, but that's okay. But let's go ahead and let's watch what happens. So one of the things I like to do with this is when they hit run, it kind of slides out of the way. Like I said, and the left pane should kind of move out of the way as well. And I will show another screen on top of this, and this one will disappear. So I'll go ahead and hit the run button. So you see that the main menu kind of dropped out of the way. Let me see here. And at this point now I have a transparency that showed up over top of the entire UI. So even if the operator wanted to, they can't click anything on the background. That's blocked out. And there will be a dialog over top of this. So once the test starts, everything slides out of the way. The operator gets various instructions. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Mike just informed me that we can go ahead. I'm going to try and fix the screen share resolution, so if you guys want to hang on 1 minute, and then we'll continue here. Alright, sorry guys, LabVIEW crashed. Was trying to fix the screen, so just waiting for LabVIEW to boot back up. And then we'll go back to where we left off. Okay, we're back. Alright, so unfortunately I can't get the pop-ups working either, but we can, if they're important, we can, I'll have to switch over to them one by one, but I'll try not to this time. Okay, let me run this one more time so we can take a look at it. So again, one of the fluid options I wanted to do is whenever a button's pressed, either the options move out of the way or a new option comes into display, slides into display. It doesn't just kind of appear right away. So I kind of like things to either slide in from the sides or slide in and out of the bottom of the screen. So I have code in here to do that using subpanels, and we'll take a look at that. So let me run this one more time. So when I run it, I just generate some data so we can take a look at the report screens and how I implemented some of these multiple views using multiple subpanels, not just one subpanel on a VI. So let's go ahead and run this one more time. Okay. Let's run. Okay. So I have to simulate the hardware on the side over here just so that the application can fully run through. Okay. All right. So now I decided to have something for the operator to kind of switch between. They don't have many options. They can just take a look at what passes and fails on a test in the interface. If I select home, they can start up the test again. There's an advanced mode for engineers that they can't access unless they have a password to get into it. And then they only have the report or the results to look at as well. So it's kind of one of the design things I wanted to implement in here. And then let's also take a look at the color scheme. So I chose to do an all black background and then kind of lighter gray transparent images and controls overlaid on top of it just to kind of show what I want the operator to be looking at. So for the graphs, I chose to do some sort of gradient, kind of bright color to draw our attention to kind of what's really important. They need to look at the output from the test on a graph. So you can visually see if it passed or failed. I have some LEDs on the side that the operator would have to know what each one of these means. And then there's some sort of tolerance for the output from a sensor on the top of the screen as well, with a pass-fail on the result column, either green or like a red text. So something that they can easily see. One of the features I wanted to show in here, which is easy to do with MGI panel actors, is how to duplicate a view. So each one of these graphs resides inside of its own VI. So what's actually running here is two VIs. There's one VI for the top two graphs, and there's another VI for the bottom two graphs. And they all each reside inside of a subpanel. The entire view that you see here, all the graphs, these controls, the tabs, this is all resides inside of a subpanel. So what we have here is basically subpanels within subpanels laid on top of each other. So the challenge when you're doing something like this is to really lay it out properly so things don't overlap on top of each other. Because now you don't have controls inside of one VI, you have controls in multiple VIs as your front panel. So now it becomes tricky to kind of lay out your application. So next we'll take a look at some of the approaches I take to kind of help resolve these issues. Okay, so let's stop this and then let's kind of jump into the project real quick. Okay, so we'll start the launcher. Top level, if anybody's familiar with Actor Framework, I assume. Create a new display, don't I? See, okay. Just a simple top level launcher. What I have here is just I have a main controller, and using the MGI panel launch root actor, I'll start up my main controller, which is going to have my main user interface. So my main controller in this instance acts as both the controller and the main panel, which will display all other panels inside of it. So we'll take a quick look at that. Now I'm not going to dive too much into each of the MGI VIs. I have a reference at the bottom of the PowerPoint, which we'll send out afterwards. Actually make this a little larger so you guys can see that better. And on his website he actually has a nice tutorial on how to implement his VIs in here so you can actually launch and control the panels. I kind of just want to focus more on how they're used within the subpanels and how these are used to lay out your user interface here. So anyway, the first thing I do is I launch my main controller. So let's take a look at what that main UI actually looks like. So we saw the VI run when everything was together. All the panels were launched. All the panels were residing inside of a subpanel. So let me close this out of the way. I'm going to open up Actor Core. So here's my main controller. Here's my Actor Core VI. So just an overview, main controller resides from the MGI panel actor class. So all I have to simply do is inherit my main controller from MGI panel actor. Let me show the parent class real quick. Scroll down. Here's the MGI panel actor class. When I override this class, I have access to all the overrides within the class. So that's as simple as, that's pretty much all you have to do to get the MGI functions. So let me open up Actor Core, put a new view on. Let's see. There we go. Okay. A little bigger for you guys. Alright. So you notice on my main screen I chose to keep the tab on the left side. It's not a subpanel. You could make the decision to also make this a subpanel, but I saved myself the headache and just kept it on the main VI. And then here is my subpanel. So I chose to kind of do a single panel application. Colored in just so you can see it here. This is the subpanel. There's only one subpanel. I don't have multiple subpanels sliding in and out. I chose to just use one that I insert other actor panels in and out of. So it's kind of my design approach to simplify how many panels you can end up with, because using subpanels you can kind of end up with too many panels, which I've done in the past. So this was kind of my approach to really reducing the amount of interfaces that I have, while also making them reusable, because now they're classes, and also making them abstract enough that I can use them in other applications, or I can spawn instances of them within this project. So let's just take a quick look at the block diagram on how this is implemented. Add another one here. There we go. Okay. One of the creating functions that MGI provides you is, what do you want to create the panel actor? What kind of panel actor do you want to be? You have window, dialog, or subpanel. Those are really the only three choices that you have right now. I believe he plans on expanding that in the future, but that's pretty much all you need to create anything, any kind of interface in the application. So window would be a top-level window, something that's going to pop up just like the main VI that we were just looking at, that pops up as a top-level window. A dialog pops up modally, so it blocks access to all the windows or subpanels behind it. In this instance, I want to actually create a subpanel here. So I chose subpanel. You simply provided a reference to the subpanel that's on the front panel here, and from that creator you get a subpanel object, and with that object is how the actor core VI knows how to display itself, essentially. So when you inherit from panel, the panel actor class, it knows how to display itself, whether as a subpanel, as a dialog, or as a window. And there is functionality to switch between the two. Just because you create a subpanel now doesn't mean you can't switch it to a window later. So it's a cool little trick to have a subpanel pop up as a dialog, or a subpanel pop up as a window, and then put the window back into a subpanel. It makes it nice, easy, straightforward way of doing something like that. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the VIs that get inserted into the subpanel. So we noticed when we started up, I had a big start button on the front. Let me pop back over to the project real quick. Let's see. There we go. So in my project here, I have a list of all the panels that exist inside this class. So in addition to main controller having the main VI, I have all these panels that I can insert into that subpanel. And what we were looking at is the main panel. So if I go in, this also inherits from panel actor, of course. Everything in my panels folder inherits from the MGI panel actor. And actor core is the VI that gets displayed at the top level. So let's go ahead and there we go. Let me show this screen. Okay. Okay. All right, let me try and square this up a little better. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this is all that resides on my top level VI right here. I have a run button. I have a reset, hardware, and just a change part. That's the only three things that resides on this actor core VI. So when I start up the main VI from the main controller, first thing I do is I insert this panel into the subpanel. So that's how we see. Now I have to do some logic within actor core to make sure that things get centered properly. I chose to center this right in the middle of the panel. So by default, it becomes a little tricky to know where your main VI reference is, to know what the panel size of your main VI is. So we'll pop over to the back end here. One of the ways that I continuously center and rearrange and reposition objects within a actor core VI that resides inside of a subpanel is I use the Lava toolkit that I mentioned earlier. That's also referenced at the end, so you guys can download it and take a look at it. So this library from Lava has a lot of the responsiveness and the snapping to grids and panels. Let me pop over to the block diagram here. Okay. So one of the, I guess, easiest ways I've found to realign the front panel VI is to use, essentially I would run something in timeout. It's actually disconnected right now, but I'll run something in timeout. I'll get a reference to the pane. I just stuck all my controls inside of a cluster, make it easier to reposition everything. So I'll get a reference to it. I'll get the coordinates and the size of my buttons or my cluster that contains all the buttons inside of it. I'll take a look at the rectangle size of the owning pane, and using these the Lava toolkit, I can easily snap to the bottom of the panel, the top of the panel. They have various functions to snap something into the middle, and then essentially that's what I'm doing. In this case, I'm snapping it to the bottom of the panel, and it's the bottom center of the panel. So it makes it easy enough. You get the position, and what I'll do here is I just continuously make sure it's in the middle. So if there's a panel resize, everything is constantly resizing to the center. That's kind of one of the So, yeah, Mike had a question about why not just use the resize event. That was the first implementation I did, and I was having issues with resize event triggering for me. It would trigger once before the UI was displayed. So when it resized, it wouldn't resize initially. So if you launched your UI, and initially things might not be lined up right, and then you hit, say, maximize, and okay, everything's lined up now. It's getting that initial resize event to occur. That's a struggle, and I could not find a good way to do it. That's why I now have them either in the timeout, or you're going to have to maybe create some sort of method that you say, okay, after the user interface is shown, resize again after that. I couldn't find a great way to do that. Yeah, if we can get something working inside of the panel resize event, yeah, that would be great. But sure, Mike brings up a good point. He's asking right now that it could be resource intensive having something like these run all the time. So, you can play around with slowing it down, but that's just kind of my workaround for it at the moment. So hopefully, I'm not sure if MGI has a good way of handling something like this, because I found using just the letting LabVIEW resize the panel can be terrible sometimes. Doesn't really do what I like it to do. So I typically disable that, and I resize everything myself and position it myself. Okay. All right, so we'll see what we got. All right, so anyway, this toolkit from one of the LabVIEW groups forums online is a real nice, easy to use toolkit to help you snap objects to various places on the UI. So it takes care of a lot of the calculations for you as well. So in addition to the snapping, there's also some automation VIs that I use. If you notice on the front panel, right, the tabs move as you click on things. As you click run, the whole entire cluster slid out of the way and off the panel. One of the ways I do that is, I put that inside of the method. That's actually a good thing. Let's take a look at that real quick. So that's the start. When I hit run, let me pop over real quick. up to their VI real quick. Utility class. Okay. One of the nice functions that the LabVIEW UI toolkit provides you with is how to move an object, any global object, from one position to another, essentially. So it takes a look at whatever the resting position is, you give it a target position, and it moves it there based on steps, timing between each loop. I think by default here, it's, what does that run? 100 times. So I think this one's actually 100 milliseconds, not 200 milliseconds. Anyway, so each object, regardless of how far it needs to move, it'll figure out, okay, it's going to move that object there in 100 milliseconds. One of the caveats from using this VI of theirs is if you don't really have a fast computer, it looks a little choppy. On my laptop, it's pretty fast. It can handle it just fine. So the movements are smooth. I noticed on some slower machines, if I deploy an application on, it doesn't quite move as smooth, so you could have to play with the timing, or I guess like the step size here. If that's like, 10 steps per loop count, you have to play with these numbers just to get it to look smooth, depending on basically what machine it's running on sometimes. So having a fast machine is nice because then you don't have to worry about it, but sometimes we have to put these applications on some kind of lower quality machines, unfortunately. So anyway, this is one of their provided VIs, also linked in the references in the PowerPoint, which is a nice thing to use kind of globally. So I use this throughout the entire application as well. Okay. Alright, so we took a look at one subpanel instance. Now let's take a look at something that would have multiple subpanels within it. So within my main panel, I also have results that I like to look at. So within my results panel, here we go. Centered on here. Okay. So within this panel, again, this is a panel actor. It gets placed inside of a subpanel. So this is an instance where I chose to use, okay, I have a subpanel within subpanel. So I have 4 additional subpanels that get inserted inside of an existing subpanel, right? So again, I'll use the loggle functions to snap the subpanels and resize them into various corners. On this instance, I have 4 subpanels, but I actually really only needed 2. I wasn't sure up front, so I have additional ones in case I need them in the future. And I simply do the same thing. I have something continuously running that's looking to resize as I need to, essentially. So if I, just for demonstration purposes, if I color these in, what I'm doing is, if I move these out of the way, I'll place one panel here, I'll resize it, I'll place another panel here, programmatically resize it using the toolkit, and that's what we saw doing. So we see the same thing running in that timeout loop. It's resizing the panel as the application is running each time. Right, so subpanels cannot run on their own. They need to be, right, they have to exist at some sort of top level VI. Right, so you could launch a window, you can launch a dialog, but a subpanel needs some VI to reside on, right? So sure, you could, if you wanted to, what I'll do sometimes to test out just a new panel without running the entire application. I'll create a test VI. I'll put a subpanel on this test VI, and I'll just launch the actor inside of the panel so I could do debugging this way if I want to kind of break things down a little easier rather than have it inside the entire application. And that's kind of been my approach towards testing out these user interfaces one at a time without having the whole application completely developed. And then as far as error handling, sometimes what I'll do is I'll create a method to forward an error all the way up to the caller. I think, Mike, I stole this idea from you. Basically, I'll forward the error all the way up to essentially main controller, so my error messaging will come all the way up top to the top level. So, I'm not sure, Mike, do you know if that exists in Actor Framework? I can't remember if the forward error message exists like that. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. That's what I thought. So, yeah, what I have implemented is a custom error handling forwarding. So whatever actor calls, it just forwards it up to the next caller, and it forwards it up to the caller, and it forwards it up to the caller until it gets to the top level and actually gets displayed. So yeah, I've implemented my own. I probably stole it from you, Mike. So that's what I have implemented in this framework as well. Does that answer the question at all, or? Okay. Let me see here. Do my best. Sorry. Okay, so sorry, Mike. Can you repeat it one more time so I can repeat this properly? Okay, so Ivan has a question. How do we pass error messages? Let me find a good example of this in here. See if I can find something. Error. Okay. Okay, here we go. So we'll take a look at one of my handle error VIs I have. Pop over here real quick, sorry guys. So handle error is an override from Actor Framework, right? So within my error handle, what I will do is I will implement this. I create a forward caller, which is right here. So whatever error comes in, that's not a stop actor core error, which is error code 43. I'll take that. I'll look at the caller enqueuer. This is the caller, and I forward that error to the caller. So it goes up one level. And this will exist in pretty much all of my actor classes. So if you create... Alright, thanks, man. So anyway, that's how I'll get the error from a subpanel or any one of these actors up to the main controller. So in my main controller, then I'll display the error to the operator. So then you'll still have your call string, so you know where the error is coming from, because you still have your source. But now you only have one place where it actually gets handled and displayed. So I kind of like to do that, to have one spot, just for handling all my errors, regardless of where they come from. Okay. Does that help answer the question? Still streaming. Ivan, does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Yeah, without going into too much detail into each one of these, what I'll do after this is, since this is kind of one of the projects I'm working on, I'll strip out a lot of the proprietary stuff, and I'll post it. I think I'm probably gonna maybe make like a white page or something. Put it up online so that you can grab the project, grab the presentation, and you kind of dig into the code a little more and take a look at it without diving into it too much here. All right. Okay, let's pop back over to the multiple subpanels, and we'll take a look at a quick implementation on how I did that. Okay. So the other thing, this is, this is the first time I've used this whole MGI panel actor, so this is by no means a finished product. There's definitely some, every once in a while, obviously LabVIEW will crash for various reasons. So the MGI panel actors or the implementation of it might have some flaws that we're trying to work out. So I think this will be a good thing once this project's finished and some more people get involved with MGI panel actors to kind of report some of the feedback back to MGI on how we're actually using it as well. Okay. Let's see. Let me hide some code here real quick. Okay. Let's look at the block diagram real quick. Here we go. Okay. Alright. So the first thing I do on the startup of this VI is I get a reference to each subpanel, just like we saw in the main VI. So I have a reference to 4 subpanels. So within these VIs, these are VIs that I created myself. I use the same function as available from MGI to create a subpanel instance, and I just store that subpanel object in the class data here so that I can display various graphs into each one of these subpanels. So this makes it nice if I want to change, have multiple displays, if I want to have different graphs, maybe I have an XY, maybe I have a waveform. I'm not sure what I want to use. It's nice for prototyping too. I'll do that sometimes. So this gives me an easy way to quickly swap out different graphs, different views if I need to. So we have our 4 subpanels. I have references. I have an object to the front panel. Now we need to put something inside of it. Now we need to put another actor inside of it. So now you can kind of see how this cascades. We had a main VI that has a subpanel. Now I launched this actor inside of it. This actor has 4 subpanels, and now I'm about to launch 4 more actors inside of each one of these subpanels. So I guess it's kind of up to you as a developer. How deeply nested do you want your subpanels to be? I'm not sure yet. I think this is still kind of like a new approach. So I don't go any further than maybe 3 levels deep. That's about as far as any of the applications I use, if anybody's wondering. Okay, so let's jump back over to the front panel and let's take a look at what gets inserted inside of the subpanel. Alright, so we have our 4 subpanels, not resized yet, and what I want to do is go back over to my project, and I want to take one of my panels that I've created and insert it inside. So what we saw during the demo was something I had here called just the segment result panel. So all this panel was 2 graphs stuck next to each other. Go. Right. Two empty. Let me resize real quick. 2 empty graphs. There's not much going on. I have a splitter in the middle here, right? Between 2. I think these are actually XY graphs. And I have a splitter up top as well. There's a title, and then I have something else hidden over here. But anyway, so there's not too much going on, but this is a nice way for me to try out different graph displays, or if it's not graphs, it doesn't matter what it is, indicators, some sort of data display. If you're streaming information to multiple waveforms, this is a nice way to easily accomplish something like that. So these classes and actors are pretty lightweight. If I go back to the project just so you can see what's inside the class, there's not much. There's an actor core. I have a method to update the panel. I have this creation, right? It's just a construct to create the class with any inputs that it needs. And this is something cool. This is what we'll take a look at. I created this method called duplicate panel as dialog. So I briefly mentioned earlier, if you have a subpanel that you want to change the state, say, okay, if the operator double clicks on the graph and I want to make it pop up as a dialog now. So you can get kind of a zoomed in view of the graph. Maybe the operator wants to have a closer look at the data and they can't see it in a small screen, or you want to have something pop out, pop back in. You can do that easily by simply take your class and you can essentially change the behavior of it. And that's what I did with this one here. So what I ended up doing is, if the operator clicks on a graph, I did a double click event, so I had to create a double click event myself, right? If the operator clicks twice within a certain amount of time, then I'm going to spawn up a dialog of this exact actor. So it's a pretty easy implementation to do. Let me take a look at it real quick. Let's open up that VI. Here we go. Oh no, not this one. Sorry. Bear with me for a second. It's not showing up. Try this again. There we go. Okay. So it's as simple as basically taking the actor that you want to launch. This time, instead of choosing subpanel, you can launch it as a dialog. Start the nested actor and then send it the information. I just have an update panel here. It sends it some graph data for representation. So that was a pretty easy way for me to have kind of something that the operator will want to see. Double click on the graph, open up a larger view of it, so you can have just that one graph on the entire screen, so they can have a detailed view of it. So MGI provides kind of a nice way to do that. Okay. So let's pop back over. And let's see if we can take a look at how that operates. Alright, let's run it again. So I'll run it, we'll go through, we'll take a look and see how everything looks put together with all the actors launched inside the subpanels, and then we're going to double click on that graph, and I'll have to switch over to the dialog. You can see it, but it'll launch and run by itself. You could set this up to launch multiple instances of itself. So you kind of get the idea of the power that you can actually use with this. So let's go ahead and run this real quick. Okay, back over. Let's see, main. Okay. So this size real quick. Sorry, guys. Okay. Here we go. So let me run it real quick so we have some data within the graph. Bear with me for a minute here. Through. So I have a simulated interface off screen for the hardware. Makes it nice for switching back and forth between real hardware and simulated hardware. Okay. So now we have some data. So now you can see there's only two subpanels here, right? I have one subpanel for these two graphs, and I have another subpanel for these two graphs. So I think, kind of one of the obvious things is, why didn't you just use 4 subpanels, and you can basically save yourself. You can have one graph and just launch it 4 times. Yeah, this was kind of, I guess, being a lazy way of doing it, so I didn't have to resize. One of the requests was they wanted to see the graphs kind of as close together as possible, so I still have some more work to do, so it almost looks seamless. That's kind of a tough thing to do with subpanels, so to get them to overlap properly, so I chose to use one subpanel, 2 graphs, and I can manipulate them a lot easier, so it kind of really just depends on what you need, whatever your requirements are for that. Alright, so I created a double click event on the graph, so I'm going to double click on it, and then we'll switch over to the expanded view of it. So then I'll have a duplicated view, so I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. Switch over the output. Okay, so here we go. So now I have an expanded view that I can enlarge and play around with, in addition to the view that's in the main interface. So I just duplicated the view. It has the same information and data. The operator can come through, manipulate the data. It doesn't affect anything that's going on with the original data. So it's kind of a nice, easy way to go through and just duplicate it. I can close it, switch back to the main interface. Everything's still here, no problem. Nothing moved, nothing got corrupted. So that's a great way that I like to use to kind of do some, I guess, some UI tricks like that using MGI panels. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Okay. All right. So let me hop back over. Just overview the project real quick. That's pretty much all there is to implementing the subpanels inside of a project. The way I like to lay it out myself, I'll have multiple panels. Each one of these panels, I try to keep them lightweight. There's not too much logic going on inside of them. Try to make them as reusable as possible in the event that I have a project in the future that maybe needs another graph that's similar to this XY graph I already created, or maybe I have another panel that's pretty much exactly the same. So I try to make them as abstract as possible, because I do notice a lot of projects kind of repeat the way I have things laid out and the controls, and at least in my business, there's a lot of duplicate work, so this saves me a bunch of time from project to project. Okay. All right, I'll stop here just for a second. Does anybody have any questions about anything we took a look at, either the UI design, layout, anything about the MGI panel actors? Now, I didn't go into great detail with how to implement them, because I have a reference within the slideshow we'll take a look at the very end. MGI does a great overview of just the basics on how to actually use just the panels. So. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have on MGI panel actors. They're pretty simple to use once you get the hang of what functions are available, how to insert them into the subpanels once you decide how you want your user interface to be laid out. I found that I really do like separating the different interfaces into multiple subpanels, and I'm okay with I guess the challenge of aligning objects whenever you don't have everything clearly laid on top of each other like in one VI. So for me, it's not too much of a pain having each one of these little panels that are reusable and abstract, and I can duplicate them and create multiple instances of them. So it actually, I find it saving a bunch of time in my development. Alright, so let me hop back over to the slideshow. We can take a look at some of the references I was mentioning before, and where I get some of this information from, some of the guidelines from. Let's see. Back over to the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. So for color themes, added a link here to Google. Google Material Design is one of the things I reference a lot. They pretty much have all things UI design guidelines that you'll see. Any of their apps that use Google Maps, YouTube, the Google search. So they have, let's forget the color palette ideas from the layout, when you're looking at how to set up the grids. And they also have the color palette tools. So if you go to this link or just do a Google search for Google Material Design, you will have access to all their icons that they use. So even some of the icons you saw in the application I was demoing are just actually Google Material Design icons. I didn't create those. They have them in multiple sizes, colors, layouts. So that's a good resource to get something quick and easy that looks professional. And it's a good read too. You can go through each one of their guidelines and read through, kind of help you maybe choose colors, choose shapes, and how things are overlaid on top of each other. So they do have a nice explanation of that. The Lava UI Toolkit, I think this is also available in VI Package Manager as well. But either way, there's a link in here. So that gives you all your UI automation, your snapping of objects throughout the grid on the interface. So this is a nice toolkit that I've used for a while. It saves a bunch of time on aligning objects if you're trying to do it yourself. And then the MGI Panel Actors resource. So this link will take you to his write-up on how to implement panel actors. It's not too long. It's pretty quick. We can take a quick look at it. Kind of last thing we do here. If anybody's familiar with visiting MGI's website. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. So Ivan has a question about, is there a way to tell the color that the subpanel has to be a minimum size? That's correct. So MGI does have a function that you can define right up front. You can define the size of the subpanel. Let me see if I have an example of that actually. I might be doing that somewhere. Let me do a quick search and see if that even exists. But there is a function that is called panel size that you can go in and define. Or you can do it dynamically. You can say, okay, one of the things that I do is I grab a reference to the subpanel, and I take a look at the container size of that, and I can say, okay, if I'm launching a panel inside of my subpanel, I can tell what size I want that to be. You can do the same with dialogues. You can do the same with the window panels. So even if your VI is, say 100 by 100, you could tell it to launch and display itself as 200 by 200. So there is an easy to use VI just for that. Okay, actually, on my launcher VI, I have an example of defining a size before I create and launch something here. Let me go over to that real quick. Launcher. Okay. So this VI here says absolute. This is defining a size. For my specific application, I have a monitor that's going to be on a manufacturing floor that's never going to change size. So for me, I just made it one size. But if it is resizable, you can have min panel. See right here, here's your minimum panel. You can have a reference to a size as well. Auto stretch, I actually haven't used. Yeah. So I believe there are some VIs in here that will actually accomplish what Ivan's asking to do. And let's see, actually take a quick look. Okay, so yeah, this VI will also specify what you want to launch. How is it going to, what's the characteristic of the VI you're launching? Is it top level? Maximize. Is it going to be referenced to a rectangle control? So I think there are some nice VIs to help you resize and feed the sizing. So I do think that's possible. All right. Yeah. Any other questions? If I finish up. Alright guys, so kind of moving forward, once I kind of finish up fully using MGI panel actors and I work out all the bugs and things I've noticed with the system, I'll do a write-up online and I'll send it out to this group on LinkedIn once it's finished. So we'll have some more examples and some more instructions with an example project to go along with it to kind of help, kind of help through actually using this in LabVIEW. All right. All right. Thanks, guys. And sorry for the difficulties. I think next time we'll try and work them out ahead of time. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.